Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. Previous presidential elections have been subject to the criticism that both parties are pretty much the same. That's unlikely to be true in the 2020 election. It appears that it'll be an election between a heavily socialist person, and I'm predicting Elizabeth Warren, and a heavily capitalist person, who will, of course, likely be Donald Trump. I wouldn't say of course. There's a possibility that given the polls, he will possibly drop out in favor of somebody like Bloomberg, who might have, I'm guessing just here, a Nikki Haley vice president. But in any case, many people believe that their views on socialism and on capitalism are driven primarily by economics or their pocketbook. But psychology plays an underconsidered role, hence this little talk. I want to talk, and the purpose of this is to ensure that your voting reflects your values and not undue manipulation by the marketing machines that are ever more sophisticated that the candidates and frankly the media tend to perpetrate on us. First, I want to talk about the psychology of socialism-leaning people. People who favor socialism tend to feel good about community, about sharing, and about collaboration over competition. They often feel that the greatest good accrues from self-sacrifice for the common good, and feel okay about redistribution until all lives are much more equal. Of course, that was foundational to Karl Marx's famous exhortation, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Such a psychology translates into sadness, often anger, even fury, that top executives make millions, owning mansions, while other people live a meager existence despite government and private charity. Socialist-leaning people also tend to feel that government is more in keeping with their feelings and values than is the private sector. Socialist-leaning people's positive feelings about redistribution and about government animate their support, sometimes their passion against President Trump, in favor of any of the 2020 Democratic presidential hopefuls, who tend to advocate, for example, for equal health care for all, without regard to whether they paid into the system or even in the U.S. illegally, free college for all, citizenship for illegals, making Puerto Rico a state, and reparations for African Americans. Now I want to turn to the psychology of capitalism-leaning people. Capitalism-leaning people tend to feel that rewarding the successful is wiser than redistributing to the unsuccessful, or the poor, or however you want, that we can argue about how that should be defined. Consciously or not, these people invoke the core psychological principle in behaviorism, which is that you get more of what you reward. People who lean capitalist use that foundational principle in supporting free market competition. That is, if people are allowed to put their dollars where they believe is best, that will, with exceptions, reward the best and let the others succumb to what is called capitalism's creative destruction. Without government propping up the unsuccessful ones, for example, bailing out GM or Chrysler, which couldn't compete with Japanese imports. The capitalist-oriented person's belief in the psychological principle of behaviorism animates their feeling that it's wrong to, for example, raise taxes on the wealthy when already the top 1% of earners pay more in taxes than do the bottom 90%. You might want to Google that seemingly surprising statistic. Capitalism-leaning people feel better about a purely merit-based rather than an affirmative action approach to hiring and to college admissions. They feel that justice accrues from a healthcare system that rewards legal residents who pay into the system by providing them with a level of access beyond the basic level that anyone might be entitled to simply by virtue of being human. That same simultaneous principle, same psychological principle of behaviorism, rewarding more, we get more of what we reward, that undergirds capitalist-leaning people's feeling that it's right to be tough on crime. For example, opposing disparate impact laws and policies that would reward felons and punish law-abiding people by giving ex-felons equal footing in employment decisions versus compared with law-abiding citizens. Hence, capitalism-leaning people are more likely to support Republicans, including Donald Trump, even though they may dislike Trump's personal style, his pre-presidential past, and that he's been inconsistent in his capitalism, for example, imposing a tariff on Chinese goods. Capitalism-leaning people ignore those because they feel so strongly about some of his other positions. Maybe most conspicuous, his calling for a merit-based immigration system, as opposed to the Democrats' egalitarian approach of amnesty for all, except perhaps for violent felons. Maybe not perhaps, probably definitely except for violent felons. Where do I sit? At the risk of appearing like a milquetoast, I am indeed a mushy moderate. I see great value in the socialist ideal of remedying the luck of where you fall in the genetic lottery, your parents' genes, how well they parent you, the locale in which you grow up. So I feel okay about redistributing some resources from the winners to the losers in that genetic lottery. Also, viscerally, I feel bad when I see people, not just the wealthy, but in the middle class, have enough money to buy dozens of pairs of shoes, to change the furniture merely because they're tired of what they have, and so on, while other people live in squalor. I feel that way about people whether they live in the U.S. or not. I have as much solidarity with a resident of New Guinea as I do with a resident of New York. On the other hand, I respect the aforementioned psychological principle of behaviorism. Within limits, we get more of what we reward. And socialism's core principle is the opposite. Reward the quote-unquote least among us. I already see signs of the ill effects of doing that. For example, the entitlement mentality, or a bite the hand that feeds you syndrome. I also worry that if the U.S. continues further down the path to ever more redistribution, the nation won't have enough money for the crucial, for example, pursuing expensive medical research, creating more useful and desired products, and ironically, funding foreign aid to help the very poor, the people that socialists claim they most want to help. So, while also considering candidates' intelligence, ethics, and drive, I will likely end up mainly voting for moderate candidates. I also feel that way about media outlets that drive our beliefs. I have the most respect for outlets that report and not distort the full range of responsibly held ideas, from pure capitalist to pure socialist. It seems that ever fewer outlets do. These days, I view Politico.com and cspan.org as the most fair-minded reporters on politics. The takeaway? Of course, as I've tried to do in this little talk, a reasonable case can be made for voting for very liberal and very conservative politicians. What seems unarguable is only that it's helpful to be conscious of your voting pattern's psychological underpinnings. That can be useful insulation against candidates' ever more sophisticated messaging. You want to vote for the politician whose voting record and promised priorities align with your psychological and other values, not for the candidate with the best marketing machine. In any event, I thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko. Feel free to give this a thumbs up, or if needed, a thumbs down. Write a comment, hit the share button and share on your social media, or subscribe to my channel. In any event, again, I thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko.